Hello, everyone. I'm Dwayne Bonifer in the Lindsey Wilson College Office of Public Relations, and this is The View from the Hill, the podcast of Lindsey Wilson College. Every week during the academic year, The View from the Hill features conversations with some of the people who help create the dynamic living, learning environment that serves the educational needs of every Lindsey Wilson student every day. In this 12th edition of the 2025 View from the Hill podcast, we're going to visit with Lindsey Wilson alumnus Rex Booth. He is superintendent of Trigg County, Kentucky schools. Rex Booth grew up in nearby Edmonson County, Kentucky. Since he graduated from the college in 2010, he's been a math teacher, a school counselor, a principal, and a basketball coach. And now he is superintendent of the schools in Trigg County, Kentucky. That makes him one of the youngest school superintendents in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. For this edition of the View from the Hill podcast, Rex sat down with my coworker, Allison Cross. Allison, who is a 2009 Lindsey Wilson graduate, caught up with Rex in the Goodhue Classroom Building, the home of Lindsey Wilson's outstanding education program, as well as the place where Rex took a lot of his education classes. Rex told Allison that he was attracted to attend Lindsey Wilson because of the opportunities in athletics and also because of some encouragement from high school friends.
Considering wanting to play basketball and run cross country at the next level, and Lindsey Wilson offered me that opportunity. Had a couple of friends, one good friend, Brett Meredith, who also went to Edmonson County, who kind of encouraged me to come this way. And one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. I ended up here. I was on a 5-year plan, essentially. So I got to spend 5 years here, and it was great, and still take a lot of great pride in being a Lindsey Wilson Blue Raider.
So when you think about Lindsey Wilson, what feeling do you get? Like, how does being a Blue Raider make you feel?
You know, there's a couple. There's pride. The small schools in Kentucky, and I'm sure it's like this everywhere in the country, but what Lindsey Wilson offered me was the ability to kind of become independent and get out on my own, but still have that small school feel, and that community feel. And it's one of those things that it's like it gets into your system and it never leaves. So, you know, great pride. You've been in my office. There's a whole Lindsey Wilson shelf. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So I want people to know that I went to Lindsey Wilson. I'm proud of being a Blue Raider. And then appreciation. You know, I talked about that ability to kind of become independent, but at the same time still be close enough to home to where if I needed something, you know, it wasn't so far away. But Lindsey Wilson offered me the opportunity to be independent and really grow up. So appreciation and pride, I think, would probably be the two words that I would use.
Okay. You majored in education.
Mm-hmm.
What is your why when it comes to education?
You know, that's a really good question, and it's a question that I ask a lot. It was actually a question that I was asked in my latest interview for the job that I got now as superintendent at Trigg County Schools. You know, just the impact. You think about the impact that you can make on young people. And I talked about the appreciation that I have for this place. And before we started, we were talking about some of those teachers that made an impact on me. And I wanted to have that same impact. You know, I wanted to be able to help our next generation kind of come into their own and grow and things of that nature. And I had a really, really good passion for math. I was a mathematics major, so secondary ed and mathematics is what I did. Enjoyed that time, and then wanted to coach basketball. I came here to play basketball. I knew it was something I wanted to do after college and things of that nature too. So a few different things boiled into that why, but, you know, just the impact word again, right?
Yeah.
You want to make an impact on people, and I don't feel like that there's any profession that does that better than education, because you think about, you know, if I'm a doctor, if I'm a lawyer, whatever it is that you decide to do, it starts with education. So I wanted to kind of be part of that foundation for people.
Yeah. So as a Lindsey Wilson alum,
mm-hmm.
if you were to come across a freshman here at Lindsey Wilson, what advice would you give them?
Stay. You know, that is the biggest one I feel like happens. People come to Lindsey Wilson, or they go to these other smaller schools, and it's hard. It's not easy that first semester and that first year. And I've told this to, you know, I've had a lot of athletes. I've got a couple athletes that actually play football here now that I coached in basketball. And my biggest piece of advice would be to stay, because I think if you come back for year two, you're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that first year is hard. And you've got to overcome some adversity, and you've got to get used to being independent and on your own, and you've got to pick up some of those adult skills that you may not necessarily have when you come in. And it's really easy to want to go back to your comfort zone. And that's not what this place does for people, right? It takes you out of your comfort zone, and it makes you comfortable being uncomfortable. I played for Coach Starks, who used to say, if it was easy, everybody would do it. He may still say that now, I don't know. Right. But that would be the biggest one is, stay. Because if you get back on campus for year 2, there's no way in the world you're leaving until you walk across the stage.
Is there any lesson that you have taken with you into your career now?
I think it's just that constant reminder to be impactful. And it is, the overcoming adversity. And I think that's what Lindsey Wilson does a great job of is, they're going to push you to be the absolute best that you can possibly be. This campus is filled with tremendous professors. It is filled with, I drove up today, you look at the facilities, it has it all right here. But, just continuing to, I guess, persevere would be a good word for it. They're going to, again, make you uncomfortable, or they're going to make you uncomfortable, and that's how true growth happens. So that would be it, was just, appreciating the constant push, which has led me to try to do that for this next generation coming now.
So you're the superintendent of schools for Trigg County.
Right.
Okay. You're pretty young for a superintendent.
That's what they tell me,
How did you get to where you are now?
To be honest, I still don't know myself. I started out as a teacher. For 5 years, I taught high school math. I then took a counseling position. So I was a school counselor for 4 years. And when I applied for that position, they're like, you're really young. Yeah, but I feel like I'm ready, After 4 years of that, I then get into the principal role at 28 years old. And they're like, you're really young. Yeah, but I think I'm ready. So when I started looking at superintendent positions, it was like, you will probably be one of the youngest superintendents in the state. Well, that's okay, because I think about going back to that, you're going to be uncomfortable and there's going to be a learning curve. But, just thinking about how I got there, hard work, determination, perseverance, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and it all comes back to, I feel like this was the foundation. I really do.
So math was your focus area?
That was it. That was it.
Tell me about your experience in the math department.
So we've talked about a couple really good teachers. You think about Dr. Dillery, was huge impact on a lot of people. Ricky Williams, Ratliff. I think about these math professors that I had. And, math is a little different because most of the time college students are used to being on like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or a Tuesday, Thursday schedule. Well, if you major in math, you're in a calculus class every morning at 7:30 a.m. I don't know if that's still the case now, but when I was here, and I did 4 of them, Calc 1 through 3 and differential equations, 7:30 in the morning, every morning but Friday. So we actually had more of an opportunity to really get to know one another. And of course, not everybody's majoring in math, and that was then, and that's probably now too. So I would walk into a classroom and there may be 4 of us in there. So thinking about having those opportunities to really get to know each other on a personal level and understand, what do you like to do outside of school? And they would use that as professors, and we would use that as students to really bond with our teachers and professors and things of that nature. And I think that's another great thing that, being in a smaller school like Lindsey Wilson offers is you have that opportunity to get to know people on a personal level. You care about them, and then the professors care about you too. So,
is there any one professor that just really will stick with you?
Dr. Dillery, God rest his soul. Dr. Dillery, I had him for the majority of my classes, and he was tough. And that was the one that I really got the being we have to become comfortable being uncomfortable. And he did that. Like, he would push, and you're like, oh, there's no way I can do this. And he would always be there, like, my office hours are these, but you call me. That impact that he had and that sense of support, it was almost like a safety blanket, if you will. He's going to push you, but he's also going to be there to pick you up at the same time.
So sitting in this classroom that we're in and Goodhue, We were here at the same time.
Right.
So odds are you had a class in this building.
A few.
Did you ever have a class in this room?
Most of my classes were actually on the other side of the hallway.
Okay.
Yeah. Or we had a couple downstairs. But very familiar with this building.
So sitting here, you look out the window and you see the admin building, you see Phillips and the sub.
Yeah, see, most of this still kind of looks the same, right? Mm-hmm. It's when you start looking outside of this core is when you see the growth of Lindsey Wilson. But I love that it's been, I guess, preserved.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could take that core and set it anywhere, and anybody who's been to this campus knows that's Lindsey Wilson College right there.
How does it make you feel to be sitting in this room, in this building, and looking out and almost seeing like a part of your past?
Right, still prideful. And you think about, the ability to reminisce a little bit and think about the various, there was activities out here all the time. I think we even got some kind of golf league going with tennis balls at one point, and we had a whole course around campus. Now, I don't know if the admin really liked that a lot. But we had a great time with it, and it's probably a very, very minor detail in the grand scheme of things, but those are memories that will last a lifetime. So just being able to drive back on campus and reminisce about the good old days, right? Mm-hmm. But then to be able to kind of look outside of that core and see the growth and take great pride in that too.
Do you have any one specific memory that you think back and you're like, that was some of the best times of my life?
Midnight breakfast was probably my favorite thing in the world. Finals week is always tough. And it's tough whether you're at Lindsey Wilson College in Columbia, Kentucky, or if you're in a huge UCLA, for example, and it's going to be tough. But to come in with your friends at midnight and have breakfast and just, kind of release for a second. I also think about, and a lot of people probably don't appreciate it now, but they will 10 years down the road. Malvina Farkle Day is amazing. And that is something that is very unique to this college. And that is something that I hope continues to happen from now through eternity. But that is something that needs to be preserved because it teaches kids, you're here to learn, right? Mm-hmm. And you're here to take in all the content so that you can go out into the world and make a difference. But that specific day teaches you something that you're not going to get from a textbook.
Yep.
But I think it should be preserved because it is huge for this community. It gets, the students that are here out into the community because this is the heartbeat, I feel like, of the community. So being able to give back for just one day, I think it teaches you the value of service and hard work. And, then you get to come back together and celebrate. So.
Do you remember any of the projects that you helped work on?
To be honest, not really. I know we did a lot of painting.
Yeah.
We did a lot of painting. We did some weeding, in different gardens and things of that nature. It just depends on the year. The thing that I do remember, though, is coming back to the mud pit, afterward. And it's like, do I really want to do that? And after a while, it's like, yeah, why not?
I think eventually they had to get rid of the mud pit.
Yeah, I can see, sitting in the seat that I sit in now, I can see that being a little bit of a liability issue. You might want to even push that aside a little bit, but it doesn't take away from our memories, right?
Yeah.
You're listening to the Lindsey Wilson View from the Hill podcast. I'm Dwayne Bonifer in the Lindsey Wilson Office of Public Relations. My coworker Allison Cross is chatting with Lindsey Wilson graduate Rex Booth. He's the superintendent of the Trigg County, Kentucky schools. Allison and my coworker Shelby Burton also produced a video of the interview with Rex. You can watch that on the college's Facebook page or the college's YouTube channel. And the URL for the YouTube channel is youtube.com/LW Public Relations. Now let's get back to Allison's conversation with Rex Booth.
To sort of wrap it up or close it all out, all of these things that you're talking about, from basketball to Malvina Farkle Day to midnight breakfast, how did all of that shape you into who you are today?
I think it teaches you, especially from an educator standpoint, the value of not just strictly focusing on the content. In my position now, and given where education is and given where, federally and state-wise, You've got to be focused on test scores, and you've got to be worried about getting the content and meeting the standards. But that isn't the end all be all. And I feel like that thinking came from this place. Even in college, they made sure at Lindsey Wilson College that you had experiences to continue to remember. I may not remember Calculus 3 at 7:30 in the morning, what Dr. Dillery was teaching at the time. What I do remember are the things that we just talked about. And I think that's crucial for kids. You want them to enjoy the experience as much as they enjoy or remember the content and things of that nature. So just the experience, and that's something that I've led with. I want to make sure that we're providing opportunities to get kids out into our community in Cadiz. I want to make sure that we're providing experiences and not just content. And I think those philosophies and those ideas really came from, and I didn't know it at the time, but really came from, being here.
Yeah. If you could describe Lindsey Wilson in one word, what would it be?
That's a tough one. One word. Wow. Service. Service. I think service would be the word, because they emphasize service from their kids to the community. They emphasize service from their professors to the kids. And I think this college is built on service. So if I had to say one word, it would be service.
That's 2010 Lindsey Wilson graduate Rex Booth. He's now the superintendent of Trigg County, Kentucky schools. Be sure to check out the video highlights from this interview. You can find those on the Lindsey Wilson College Facebook page or on the college's YouTube channel, which can be dialed up at youtube.com/LWC Public Relations, and you'll find it under the videos tab. And that's going to do it for this 12th edition of 2025's View from the Hill. View from the Hill is produced by the aforementioned Shelby Burton. She's also Lindsey Wilson's Assistant Director of Public Relations and Media Producer. And you can tell us what you like or don't like about this podcast. You can do that by firing off an email to us at news@lindsey.edu. Also, be sure to encourage your friends, family members, and neighbors to subscribe to A View from the Hill. They can subscribe to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We wouldn't mind it if you give us a nice rating on either or maybe both of the platforms. You can also enjoy this podcast on the college's YouTube channel. To find this episode or previous episodes from 2025, point your browser to youtube.com/LWC Public Relations and click on the podcast tab. Until our next edition, I'm Dwayne Bonifer in the Lindsey Wilson Office of Public Relations. Thanks so much for listening. So long, everybody, and have a nice day.